people are so untrusting now, they don't even trust me on a lot of issues. I mean, people don't trust their neighbors, and society does seem to be degenerating a bit. My only issue is, that said, that I know people that worked on the mission who say it was absolutely real, and you can watch famous films of them in mission control. People I know, they're not making it up.
For a conspiracy like that to work, you would have to have conned 450,000 Americans.
Because that's how many worked on the program.
That's how many worked, and you just couldn't do it. Look, people have to remember that there's still, when you have a population of the world as large as we have, a very, very micro percentage is still a significant number, and some of those people actually still believe the Earth is flat. So if a few of them want to believe that we didn't go to the moon, let them. It's not an issue that comes up in my presentations. And,
I mean, the Earth being flat, that's clearly ridiculous. Though I've actually been contacted by some flat earthers saying I'm covering up the fact that it's some Atlantean conspiracy. But the reason, I mean, obviously, this has been building. I would imagine you get asked that sometimes because there are issues that make people question. And so let me just throw a few of those out to you.
Wait a minute. I think there are more important things to talk about, but just let me say that when I'm out talking to the public, I do not get that question. I only get that question from talk show hosts.
Okay,
really, that's true. And so I think we ought to spend our time on more important issues.
Okay, why haven't we been back to the moon in 40 years?
Well, that's a really long topic, but the most immediate is that even though George W. Bush, articulated a very good return to the moon and on beyond policy, neither his budget office or the Congress properly funded that. Had it been properly funded, we would be well on our way as we speak. But in the absence of adequate funding, we have had to slip schedules in order to keep the program alive. Yeah. Now you have an administration that, for all indications, is not going to pursue a aggressive role for the United States in deep space. And they're going to leave that to the Chinese, potentially the Indians and the Japanese, and maybe Europe. Yeah. And that, I think, is an extraordinary mistake. It's as big a mistake in the long term as we could make relative to protecting liberty here on this planet.
Sure.
You have non-democratic regimes dominant in deep space, dominant on the moon and elsewhere, then it's going to be very, very difficult to continue to protect liberty on this planet.
Sure. Have you heard of I guess you were in the Senate around that time, Dr. Bob Bowman, who worked on some of the Star Wars program before it was declassified in the early 80s, and he's saying, and he's told me, he said, look, Alex, not only is there a space program, but there's a lot of it you don't know about, and I can't tell you about it, but he's mentioned a few things that have slipped out or been declassified, the whole robotic program, and they admit that a lot of the shuttles been military secret missions.
Oh, no. Not a lot. There have been a few Air Force missions that are missions of the space shuttle in which there were some classified payloads, but you shouldn't. Yeah. The shuttle, all the shuttle flights, except with very few exceptions, have been purely civilian flights.
Sure. You did a lot of the photography on the moon, didn't you?
Oh, yeah. Well, both Gene Cernan and I had cameras, and we took a lot of the pictures. I happened to be more active in taking pictures of the Earth as we went towards the moon, and so that full Earth...
But you took the famous blue marble photo, didn't you?
The full Earth that shows the continent of Africa in its entirety, yeah, that's one I took. I was about 34,000 miles away from Earth when I snapped that.
Now, again, because people kill me if I don't ask, where are the stars? Is it because the Earth's so bright that it blots those out?
Yes, it's the same problem you have on a sunny day here on Earth of seeing stars. Just too much light for a wonderful optical system we call our eyes to handle. The eyes are great, but they do not have what scientists call the dynamic range to see both the bright surfaces and stars.
Well, that's like when the moon is up at night, you can't see stars anywhere around it, right?
That's correct. Same thing. The moon just dominates the eye and the and the eye doesn't close down enough, doesn't close the iris enough to see the stars.
Well, I know we've got advanced technologies, and I know the A-bomb and the hydrogen bomb and the superconducting super colliders are real, and I know that there are some space plane programs, even if you say there aren't a Dr. Schmitt, that are going on. And so that's why I believe in our potential, and I want to believe we went to the moon, and I believe you. When you sit, I mean, you sound very credible to me. You say you don't get asked this on the street. People are probably scared to ask you. I mean, I'm sure you've seen it all over the news.
No. The American people are never scared to ask anybody a question. Never, believe me.
Well, I mean, certainly, it's becoming a bigger controversy, and that's why I brought it up.
I understand. You have to deal with it. Fortunately, I don't.
Well, I mean, I know you're right about the global warming being a hoax, and I mean, there's government and corporations engaged in a hoax. So I think how do we fix this crisis of confidence? Because it's even happening not just with the government, as you know, it's happening with people in business now. How do we fix that?
Well, I think you fix it by, again, people of common sense taking back control of their government and making it right, and getting good people to run for office. I personally would like to see term limits, but you're never going to get the Congress to do it. That's something the states are going to have to do if we're ever going to have a constitutional amendment. The founders just didn't realize that their successors would make a career out of going into politics. It was not on their visible horizon.
Sure, we only got about 2.5 minutes left. Dr. Schmitt, one word to describe what it's like to be 400,000 miles away or less from the Earth. One word to describe standing on another planet.
Privilege. I was greatly honored and privileged to have an opportunity to do it, as were all of my colleagues. We were just the tip of the spear. 450,000 Americans held that spear, and we just represented them on the moon, but they made it happen.
And that is my last question on the issue, and then I won't ever bring it up to you again, I promise, if you join us again. How did the film make it back through the Van Allen radiation belt?
Well, that belt's it doesn't have that much radiation. If it was going to damage the film, it would have damaged us. There is radiation there, and if you lingered in it over time, you could accumulate a dose that could be a problem. But we went through it so fast that there wasn't any significant dose on the film or on us.
Well, you know what's neat? We're starting to see space tourism. If they'd really give us a space program, some of us could live long enough to actually go to the moon. But pretty soon they'll say the moon doesn't exist, and maybe it's made out of cheese. Let me tell you, Mr. Schmitt, Dr. Schmitt, Return to the Moon is the book. He's out there exposing global warming as the fraud it is, man-made global warming. Is there any websites to fire out, sir, or any other info?
No, I think if people look at the book Return to the Moon, they'll know what the future will be and how the...
Yeah, I'd like to have you back up in the next few months to just talk about the book itself and more about the moon. And thank you for entertaining those questions. Let me say bye to you here at the end. Retransmission starts now. INFOWARS.com.
Thank you for listening to GCN. Be sure to visit GCNlive.com today.